Hello everyone and welcome to AC Sisterhood Speaks, Alliance. We know it's been a while, it's been a busy year for everyone so far, but we're back with a new episode. The Alliance episodes are a new offshoot of our regular podcast with a focus on topics that may not always be directly related to Assassin's Creed, but are relevant to the AC Sisterhood's general goals of representation and equity in gaming. I am your host, Six Keys, joined by my co-host Lorena.
Hello.
And our guest today is Marion Mian Baxer. Welcome.
Hi.
Marion is the creator and co-founder of Project AWR, which focuses on Asian women's representation in gaming. We're excited to learn more about this initiative, so without further ado, let's dive right into our questions. So, first off, can you tell us a little bit about your background? How did you get into the industry, and would you say yours was a traditional career path?
Yes, so my background, I started in press relations and communication in clubs and festivals in France. And one of my friends was working at Ubisoft at that time, and he told me that there was an open entry position at Ubisoft in community management. And I worked at Ubisoft for 4 years in community management, and currently I'm working as a senior community manager at Team 17, primarily on the games Marauders and Gord. So that's how I started in the industry. I'm not sure that my path is a traditional one. I know that some companies, such as Ubisoft, have entry-level positions, but others don't. And as I said, I started in press relations and communication before turning to community management.
So Marion, what is Project AWR, and what inspired you to start this initiative?
So Project AWR is called like that because it means Asian Women Representation. It's a side project that I co-founded with Karen Lee, who used to be a community developer on Rainbow Six and then Assassin's Creed at Ubisoft. Hen Josie, who is an artist who mainly does Rainbow Six and Valorant artwork. And Matt, who is the head moderator of some of the Ubisoft Discord server that we had, like Assassin's Creed and Immortals Phoenix Rising. So our goal is to promote and highlight Asian women in games. So if you identify as an Asian woman and you are part of the gaming industry globally, not only professionally, you can join us. And if you're just interested in supporting the cause and working towards a better representation, you can also follow us and join us. What inspired me for this initiative was that I was trying to know more about my roots because I was born in Vietnam and raised in France by French parents. And I was also looking for better representations inside and outside of the gaming industry. We also had a lot of issues with accusations in the gaming industry in the past 2 years. And following that, with the COVID, we had anti-Asian hate movements. So all of this combined led me to need a safe space, and it made me question the representation that we had as Asians or Asian women.
Thank you. Yeah, it sounds like there was really kind of a lot going on. If you can tell us more, what are the goals of Project AWR?
So our goals are to create a safe space and to network. So for the safe space, we want our platforms, especially our Discord server, to be safe for Asian women. Everyone can join the Discord server, which is why we have a space locked for Asian women that is only accessible on request. And we've had a lot of feedback saying that people felt really safe and that they could talk to people who can relate to them or that went through the same kind of path or had the same experiences, which is really nice. Members also know that nothing that they share is used outside of the server unless we ask them, whether it's a quote, an artwork, or anything. And then we ask them to sign a form so they have a guarantee that we're not doing it behind their back or that we're just assuming that they would be okay with us sharing anything. And the Discord server Even if it's accessible to everyone, it's still on request, and then we have filters because, again, we want to make sure that it's as safe as possible. For the networking part, it's very nice for Asian women and for other people as well to get to know more about Asian women, to highlight Asians in general. And we're just trying to uplift each other, especially because Asian women are very often disregarded. And I think that the more we know about Asian people and the more we support each other in that, and the easier it will get. And as I mentioned previously, I think that meeting other Asian women in the industry has been very helpful for a lot of people, especially because many felt very isolated during the lockdown. So yeah, I think it was just nice to find other people like us.
So you mentioned that everyone can join, and that also means non-Asian allies, right?
Exactly. You don't have to be a woman, you don't have to be Asian to join the server. As I said, we have a space just for us, but the global server is open to everyone. So if you're just interested in learning more about Asian culture, representation, you can join. I'm also fine with people who want to join and just lurk. I know that some people were a bit unsure about that. They were asking if they could join, even if they didn't know if they wanted to take part in discussions. I'm completely fine with that. So yeah, we just wanted to be as open and welcoming as possible because I think that having allies is important, no matter who they are and where they come from.
So for our next question, what are some challenges that Asian women in particular face in the gaming industry?
That's a very broad topic. I think that some of the challenges that we can face in the industry would be racism and sexism, which doesn't mean that it's the case everywhere and that it happens that often. I know that I've been lucky with that. I rarely had issues. It's not the case for everyone. Obviously, it's different for other people, but I think it's getting better and better.
Would you mind maybe elaborating in what ways do you see or feel like it is getting better?
I feel like people are starting to talk about it a lot more, and we see more and more people trying to work on that, to be more open, to pay attention to the way they will phrase things and to what is or isn't racist. I'm thinking about jokes that people will make that can be funny for them, but then they don't realize how racist and hurtful it can be or sexist. And I think that now people are starting to understand that just because they don't see it doesn't mean it cannot hurt people. And at least for what I've seen myself, it seems to get better. I know that the people I know are trying to do better on that side. So I'm really hoping it's the case in the wider industry.
So you feel like the growing awareness is something that has been helping?
I think so. And I think that it's something that helps with many issues is that the more people speak up and the more we will see people speaking up and they won't be as afraid as they used to be. And for my part, I know that it's something that helps a lot. Every time I see people speaking up, I'm thinking maybe I could do it as well when I have an issue. And we're also, as victims of racism and or sexism, we're also acknowledging the fact that we can be angry about that, we can be upset, and it's fine. It's not always on us to be the bigger person and to just think, maybe the intention wasn't bad. And I agree that sometimes the intention isn't bad, but it doesn't mean that we cannot feel hurt. And that's the kind of things that I try to express more now. When I think that 2 or 3 years ago, I would never have said anything if I heard something racist or sexist towards me. So I think that just seeing people that you know trying to speak up gives you a lot more courage. And at least it also tells you, you're a victim of this issue, but it doesn't mean that you're the issue.
It's really encouraging to hear that you feel that way.
It is, and it feels good. Honestly, it's still hard, I think, sometimes. I think that speaking up is always very scary, but I think that step by step, it's getting better.
Yeah, exactly. It's that step by step. So it's not that the problems are gone, it's just getting better.
Exactly.
I'm sure you're familiar with the phrase, but some of our listeners might not be. Um, there is this concept called the model minority myth, which is that Asian people are often treated differently from other people of color, in that there's this sort of stereotype that Asians are like the model minority in that they are hardworking and keep quiet, keep to themselves. And that is like the expectation from white people, that this is how all minorities should act, just keep to your own communities and keep your head down, never raise a fuss about anything. But those are also harmful stereotypes that they're not always accurate. People are people, so you shouldn't lump everyone together and have these expectations. What are some of the ways that the model minority myth can harm Asian women in their professional lives?
Well, I think it's a part of the stereotypes that are so deeply engraved that it can affect us, but at the same time, we're probably also used to it, sadly. So I'm not Asian American, and I also haven't been raised by an Asian family, so I don't think it affected me as much as it can have affected other people I know. But something I've heard a lot was that Asians are hardworking and very resilient. And it might be true, but it doesn't mean that you have to be hardworking and resilient at all times. And it also does not mean that everyone is like that. I haven't had the stereotype of the Asian family striving for excellence, but I know that it affected some of my Asian friends who were raised by Asian parents. Like I have Vietnamese friends who are really affected by that still to this day, and they're like 30. And I think that it's a myth that is both internally imposed and also externally reinforced. It's like when you have a teacher assuming that they don't need to help you as much because you're going to be the hardworking kid. You're going to be quiet if you have issues, and you're not going to be a leader. You will just do your own hard work in your corner and be resilient about it. And it might be true in the professional industry, like as a grown up, let's say. I haven't felt it, but I'm pretty sure it can still affect us. I think it's something that has been internalized for so long that I wouldn't be surprised if people kept assuming that, even if they don't voice it.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, it's not necessarily that it affects all Asian women the same way, but there are lots of different nations that fall under Asian, so there might be cultural expectations that vary between those cultures.
Exactly.
And it is also already this expectation that falls on women in particular. Like you mentioned, that like a teacher that ignores you because they already expect, well, you're a woman, or a girl in school is easily ignored even if they're struggling because they're quiet, or they don't cause much trouble, they don't disrupt class. So it's expected that they're doing fine, they're getting good grades, but they might be under immense stress and pressure. And I think that's probably something that Asian women from certain cultures struggle with even more so, because of that cultural expectation that they should be doing well in school and their work.
Yes, and I think it can be really hard because as women, we are often expected to do a lot more than our men counterparts to get to the same result or same salary, which also makes it hard. So if you add, stereotypes and racism on top of it, it means that we have to do like double or triple the amount of efforts to get to the same point, which can be very, very frustrating. And that's also why I think that we need more, people of color and marginalized people in higher positions, so all of this can change.
Thanks so much for your insight, Marion. That was actually really interesting because being American, the perspective here is a little bit different. Like they're really, I think the model minority myth is very pervasive. So it's really fascinating to hear what it's like in other countries. And I think you have some really good points. So thank you. Um, this is more for us and for the audience that might be listening. But how can non-Asian industry peers in the larger community, what can we do to show our support?
I think that to show support, there's many things that can be done, and I think it has to be a support that you show a bit every day. It's like the support towards LGBTQ community. You cannot support this community one day a year. It doesn't make sense. And I think that any kind of support works the same. You have to show support, and it has to be coherent with what you do and with your attitude towards general issues. So I think that you can start by questioning the representation of Asians or Asian women. Let's say if you have a character that is Asian, does it make sense to have that character voiced by an Asian person, or is it fine if it's like a white person, for example, which is the most recent example I had in mind because I saw something about it today. And we had a lot of controversies surrounding Asian people. I know that we had the issue with Kelly Marie Tran in Star Wars. And I think that people have to just support people in general and not forget that, if it's an actor, you have to separate the role from the actor. So you can hate the role, but you don't have to hate on the actor. And it's the kind of representation that we need. But if every time we have a glimpse of representation, it's taken away from us because some people hate on the character that the people are playing, we will never get there. And then I think we can also share a lot more about Asians in general and Asian women, which is why even if we are focused on Asian women in games, we also share a lot about, just mainstream representation, whether it's video games in general, whether it's cinema, it's Olympic sports. We just try to show more of what Asians can do and who they are, because most of the time they're just in the shadows, which is a bit sad. We've had a lot of Asian actors or realizators who were nominated and who won awards recently, as in these past few years. And I think it was amazing to see these people in the spotlight because it doesn't happen often enough. I think that it's also important to look for different perspectives and points of view, and not having only the input of straight, cisgender white men. I'm not saying we have to exclude them. I'm just saying they don't always have to be the majority taking decisions, whether it's for representation, whether it's for hiring processes and everything like that. We need, as I said earlier, we need more people of color, we need more marginalized people, because we cannot have a better representation of all of these groups if we don't have anyone who is part of these groups and who understands the issue, who understands what it's like to be a part of us. And there are also many cultures to celebrate and appreciate in Asia. There's not only East Asia, which is the most represented one. There's also Southeast and South Asia, and they have unique perspective to offer. And it's not just, Asians as a whole. There's so many different cultures and types of food and types of everything. And it's so interesting because even for me, as I said, I was raised by a French family, and I'm learning a lot every day, because people will share, traditions that they have. They will talk about the things that they celebrate in their country. They will share a picture of their food, and most of the time I don't know what that is because I wasn't raised like that. So I have to go on Google and then I ask questions. And I think it's amazing, and I wish that more people would be, just curious in general and not be focused on one or two countries and think, okay, we know a bit about these countries, so that's enough Asian representation. They should be fine with it. And I know that there's also that movie that released very recently, Everything Everywhere All at Once. I've heard it was amazing. I haven't watched it yet, but I know that it's something that a lot of people talked about, saying that it was good for representation and it was nice that we could have a movie that was Asian focused and performing so well, because maybe then it will also prove to the people behind the scene that we have a public for that as well.
I did see the movie and it was amazing. You should absolutely go see it when you have a chance.
I can't wait to watch it.
Yeah, me too.
So if I can summarize what you said, it sounds like the best thing that we can do for ourselves is to seek out ways to educate ourselves on the diversity of Asian countries and maybe look for some voices in the industry that we should be listening to. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, exactly. It's just be curious and be open minded. You don't have to know everything about everything, obviously, but just keep in mind that Asia is not only East Asia, and that you can always learn more about a culture, you can always learn more about a group. And I think it's important to, just consider that there are so many things that the different Asian cultures have to offer. If you like the representation that you see of East Asia, you might like the representations that you see of South Asia or Southeast Asia. And again, I don't have anything about East Asia, obviously, but I know that even for me, that's the kind of things that I see the most, and I think it's just a bit of a shame that not other cultures are as highlighted as these ones. So again, just be curious. I think it's fine to ask questions. It's fine to say that you don't know or that you would like to know more about something, but everything that is showing support, it always helps.
Yeah, and I think I can hazard a guess why so many folks are kind of focused on like a couple of countries in Asia, and that's largely to do with how much pop culture we import from those countries. So countries like Japan and Korea, there's definitely a lot of folks who love their music, their comics, their movies. But also, it's kind of been in my experience that even if you're, say, like a really big anime fan, for example, that doesn't really teach you the culture behind those countries. And there's definitely some folks who will go visit the country thinking it's going to be one thing in their head and being very kind of surprised by what they find when they get there. So just a little cautionary tale to anyone who like loves just K-pop or loves like, maybe Asian films. I mean, you can't judge an entire country just by their pop culture. Like there's definitely an entire history and culture behind it. So definitely be inquisitive. Seek out opportunities, seek out
Yes.
voices from those countries to see what it's like.
I think that showing support can be hard because you can want to show support, but then there's also the question of when does it become cultural appropriation, which is a completely different topic. But I know that there's a line between them, and it's very hard to see, even for me or for us. And I know that some people who want to show support just end up, looking like they're trying to appropriate the culture. And I wouldn't know where to draw the line, honestly. But at least the way I see it, at least it is also a way to show support. So it's fine for me, but I know that for some other people it might not be. And there's no right way to show support, I think. But what I would love people to keep in mind is that it's not enough to put, sakura trees everywhere and Chinese or Japanese characters in a game or in a movie to just think that it's enough representation and that it's accurate and that it's what we want to see, because that's not how it works.
To that point, I just read about a Chinese author who wanted their audiobook to be read by someone who can pronounce the Mandarin correctly. And unfortunately, the company got a Japanese person instead of someone who could speak Mandarin. So it's even for those companies, like they can just mix everything together like, oh, well, they're an Asian person, so.
Yeah, it happens very, very often. I know that in some companies they're trying to improve that. I'm talking about gaming here because obviously that's what I know. But for some games and some characters, they've been looking for help from the people that were concerned by the culture or the characters, which means that if they had like a Japanese character, they would go to Japanese companies or studios or people and ask them about their culture, about how would you say this sentence, like does it sound natural to you or is it weird, and then have people from the same origins voicing the characters. And I think that again, there's still a long way to go, but seeing this kind of improvement is amazing. I know that we had a Filipina character, I think it was in Valorant recently, and she was voiced by a Filipina actress, and a lot of people talked about it, and I was really happy for them because that's the kind of representation we need. I know that for Vietnam, most of the time, what we see is the Vietnam War. That's it. I've never had a good Vietnamese representation, so I don't know if it's me. Maybe I just haven't seen anything. But at least as far as I know, most of the time when Vietnam is concerned, it's just about the Asian War. I know that in some movies, you will have, I don't know, Korean or Japanese or Chinese people dubbed by people who don't have the same native language, and it kind of feels weird, and it's just sad because there's so many talents out there that could find work and be highlighted this way, but instead of that, we just create these characters and use other people to voice them or to act them, and I think it's just not fair. And I think if we want to have a better representation, we have to do it completely and not just partially, and just show, hey, here's an Asian character, but they're not going to be voiced or motion captured by an Asian actor.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of conversations about that within recent years, even within kind of the voiceover community, because I've definitely seen cases where maybe an actor stepped down from a role because they felt they weren't the most appropriate person to voice that character. And I definitely, I've heard that sometimes they'll put out casting calls for a certain type of person, but maybe it's not always honored. Maybe they'll end up going with maybe a white actor anyway. So yeah, and unfortunately, I think it's something that's starting to change, but it definitely requires very deliberate action. It's something, yeah, fans have started to call for more and more. I'm going to kind of segue into our next question, which kind of takes a little bit more of a serious tone. You mentioned it earlier when you were discussing why you're inspired to start AWR, but we are aware of there's been a lot of violence and discriminations against the Asian community lately. Has this impacted the gaming community or industry in any way?
I think that discrimination has probably been prevalent all along, but Asian people are starting to stand up more and to report issues more. I think the good thing is that now people around us are more conscious of the issues and they're trying to work on it. And we have seen the emergence of employee resource groups. I know that there's one at Ubisoft that I know. I know that there's one that has been created in, I think it was at Riot very recently, last week or something like that. And we need a lot more of that. We need more visibility on these issues. But again, I don't know if it has impacted us directly at work, but the positive effect of it is that people are more careful now. And I think that's the only positive point that we can take away from the situation.
Yeah, I definitely try to check in on my friends when those stories would come out because I could definitely tell it was kind of taking a toll on them mentally, and I can't imagine that's good for bringing your best self to work. But I'm glad to hear it hasn't had any sort of a bigger effect on folks.
I think it was fine for me because I'm not in the US or in Canada, but I know that for people living there, it was a lot harder. not necessarily at work, but just in a global way, in their day-to-day life, it was a lot harder and a lot more scarier. So yeah, we still need to talk about this, and we still see a lot of articles in media talking about COVID and showing pictures of Asian people, and it's been 2 years. And with the rise of the anti-Asian hate movements, I don't understand why it's still happening. But at the same time, I'm not really surprised, sadly.
Yeah, I don't know that any of us have a easy answer to that one, but I definitely feel that's why it's important for us to kind of be aware of what's going on in the climate and I think right now is especially important to be allies with our friends.
Yeah, definitely. I think that it's also very important to just, as you said earlier, just check on people who might be affected, especially if you see that their behavior changes, like if they're more quiet and more isolated or more sensitive, maybe it affects them. And as I said, I'm far away from the events that happened in the US and in Canada, but it still affected me. So I cannot imagine what it was like for people living there. So I think it's just important to show a lot of compassion and empathy.
Yeah, it's something that both gamers themselves and I think companies as well should be aware of, that when designing, for example, reporting systems in games with voice chat or chat in general, that maybe they can take a look at if they're really doing enough to protect their players from those kinds of, discriminatory messages.
Yeah, I think it's complicated to see everything and to monitor everything, but I'm pretty sure that with time we will find better ways to make sure that people feel at least a bit safe in whether it's within the community, within the industry, within a company. That's really something that I want to work on as much as I can, inside the company I'm working in, or whether it's with my project. But it takes a lot of people to fight for this kind of causes. I just hope that the more we will talk about it and the more we will have people joining our cause and trying to help on that regard.
So, speaking of projects, since you mentioned it, does AWR have any upcoming projects that you would like to share?
Yes, we have been working on the mentorship program recently, and we would love to have a beta test soon. I don't know how soon yet, because we still have a few questions that would need to be answered first. But that would be the first point. And the second one would be the consultancy. We are trying to find experts on the topic for guidance. And we are also trying to gather members who could help work on it. I think that ultimately we would like to work with ERGs or external companies who would need help on representation topics. And we could have experts, if we find experts, and members who could just give their point of view as it's my culture, so I know what I'm talking about. It's something that I've just recently started working on, so I don't know how long it will take. I don't know if we will find people to help with that, but it will be very interesting, and I'm really looking forward to it. And then we also want to get in touch with more different companies and ERGs to see how we can collaborate with them, help them, and also, again, work towards a better representation, inclusivity, and a safer space and industry.
Can you tell us maybe what these mentorship programs, what do they look like? What do you have planned?
So for the mentorship, the goal of the mentorship program would be to offer an opportunity to build an authentic, ongoing relationship between mentor and mentee, but also to help the mentee get interviews or to leverage the mentor's network. And the way we want to do that is to find mentors who have years of experience, and that would be mid-level in their career, having personality and common interest with the mentee, and the mentee would be interested in joining the gaming industry or would be in an entry-level position and trying to evolve. And so we would like to try helping them breaking into the junior level in their career.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, I just want to say that one thing that we've learned a lot from these interviews is that mentorships are just so important because it can be such a difference in someone's career. So I think that's amazing. Good luck with that.
Yeah, I think what would be nice as well, because we're not sure if we want mentors to be only Asian women, or if we want mentee to be only Asian women, or is it a bit of, a bit of everything and everyone. So that's why we're trying to debate around that right now. We don't know what would be the best. We don't know what would be too open or too restrictive, what would make sense, because obviously we would think that having an Asian woman mentor as an Asian woman mentee could help, but it doesn't mean that other people couldn't beneficiate from either being a mentor or a mentee. So that's why we're still trying to to find a way to do it properly, and to make it interesting as well.
If I can share this story because I think it's a little bit relevant to what you're attempting to do here. I had a very good friend who's from the United States, and she was working in Japan for some years. She was working in Tokyo, and her office did require that she was interfacing with clients directly. And one thing that really helped her is there was an older woman in her company who really mentored her and kind of helped her navigate kind of like social customs and the ways of doing business that were really important to her job. So I think it can work either way. I think it really depends on where people are located. Maybe there are cultural differences that need to be navigated. I don't know how different companies work in different countries, so there's definitely a lot of things to explore. So I look forward to hearing more about it when you have it set up.
Yeah, I'm very excited about it. I think that's what is going to be determined with the beta phase. The reason why we want to have a beta run is also so we can see what works and what doesn't, what makes sense and what is the easiest, because we're not sure how many mentors or mentees we will have, what kind of program we want to put in place, like how regularly it would be, how much time we would need, how many sessions. So we have an idea, we have a plan for that, but again, we will have to try things out, and I'm really looking forward to it, especially because it's good to think, you can be a mentor just because you have the experience for it. It doesn't matter if you're not the best. I would say community manager for me, because that's my field. It doesn't matter if you're not the best community manager in the industry. It doesn't mean that you don't have valuable experience and insight to offer to someone who is at a more junior level than you. And I think that it's something that I keep forgetting about. So having a mentorship program is also a nice reminder of that. And it will, I hope, encourage people to share their experience, even if sometimes they can feel like it's not enough. They probably have a lot more to say than they would think.
Yeah, the imposter syndrome is very real in the gaming industry. So I think it's actually a good push to those who have experience to be a little more confident in their experience.
Yes, I talk a lot about the imposter syndrome, but I'm the first one complaining about it all day, every day. So it's hard, but we work on it. It's okay. We'll manage.
We're up to our last question, which is where can people find and join Project AWR on social media?
So you can find us on the website projectawr.com. We also have a link tree. We are on Twitter at Project AWR and on Instagram at project.awr. If you want to join the Discord, you can DM us anywhere, but you will have to request access, and then we will send you a link with the instructions in it. You cannot find links to join the Discord server anywhere, so don't panic. You just have to DM us anywhere, anytime.
And if I can ask if there are any industry professionals who are listening who are interested in joining your mentorship program, should they also DM you?
Yes, they can DM us on Project AWR, or they can DM me directly. My username everywhere is Marion_Mian. On social media, I have the same username everywhere. It's very easy. Otherwise, they can go through the Project AWR accounts. It's fine as well. I'm the one handling them, so I will see the message anyway.
Great, thank you so much.
So I'm afraid that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us, Marion.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I was really happy to take part in the podcast. I really like what you do, and I cannot wait to see the feedback on this podcast. Thank you.
We look forward to seeing what's in store for Project AWR. And if you, the listeners, are interested in supporting them, you can check out the links in the episode description. So thank you both again, and join us again next time on AC Sisterhood Speaks, and have a good week.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.